Hey, hi. Wanted to wish you all a Shana Tova, a happy and a sweet year. Mom and Brian, Dad Carol, Lisa, Prem, and Ella. Want you all to know that we're thinking about you and we miss you all very much. And wanted to bless you with a tremendously sweet, happy, successful, and healthy year. Right now, on the eve of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, it's a very interesting time being here in the high holidays between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and I thought I'd take a minute to say a few words about some of my thoughts on the high holidays. Rosh Hashanah is the Day of Judgment, and Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. But there's a lot of confusion. A lot of times it's not exactly clear what's happening. I know for many years I really figured that, okay, it's not so fun to go and to stand up and to pray so much, but if this is what it takes to be forgiven for all the bad stuff I've done, then I'm ready to go through it. And the truth is, there's a lot more going on. So Rosh Hashanah is the Day of Judgment, but it's not so clear why we're being judged. I mean, to be honest, if God really loves us that much, like, why would you judge me? I went to traffic court like a year ago, and the judge took away my license. It's like, what a mean person. Why would you do that? If you were my judge, Mom, you would never take away my license. So if God loves us so much, why is he judging us in the first place? And one of the explanations is that, you know, look, if you're going shopping and you're about to park your car and at the last second somebody swerves in and steals your parking spot and you're like, hey buddy, that was really rude, you know? Let's go work this out, you know? I think I'd like to schedule an appointment and maybe we can go to therapy and really work this out, because that was not okay what you did, man. And the guy's like, lady, I don't even know you. Like, I'm not going to therapy with you. Go away, right? It makes no sense to judge somebody in a relationship that has no meaning, right? But when do you judge somebody, right? If there's a relationship that you have a tremendous amount of energy invested in, and then somebody behaves in a way that's not in keeping with the responsibility and the obligations of that relationship, right? For example, let's say I usually come home around 5:30 or 6 from work. One day, I don't show up till midnight, and my phone's off, and my wife can't reach me, and she hasn't heard from me. By the time I get home, she's frantic, she's angry. What are you doing? How could you do this? Where have you been? I've been worried sick, right? You gotta work that out, right? She's judging you, and we have to go through a process of judgment, right? Because what is judgment? Judgment is reconciliation. Judgment is saying, hey, you behaved in a way that's not in keeping with the obligations and the rights of this relationship, and we need to fix that. We need to go through a process that's going to bring your responsibilities back on track, because otherwise I just can't go on. If you continue to show up late at night without any explanation, I'm not going to be able to go on, or this relationship is going to change significantly. So I'm judging you. I'm causing you to go through a process that's going to get our relationship back on track so that you can live up to who I need you to be, and so that we can continue to relate on this deep, meaningful, and intimate level, right? A relationship that has no substance, there's no need for judgment. But judgment is very necessary to relationships that mean something, right? If I call home, honey, something came up at work, I'm going to be 7 hours late coming home tonight, I'm so sorry, right? And what does she say? Oh, okay, doesn't matter. Don't even let me know. I didn't even put dinner in the oven. I didn't even notice you were gone. It's fine. Don't worry about it. You'd be shocked, right? Because you expect that your absence means something. And when your wife or your partner gets angry at you for falling short of your responsibilities, that's a sign that you are meaningful and essential in that relationship. And that's what Rosh Hashanah is. Rosh Hashanah is the day of judgment, right? There's so much judgment happening. There's so much that we have to work on fixing about how we may not have lived up to our true potential, that it's 2 days. It's a 2-day rectification process, right? It's a 2-day rehabilitation process. Now, the beautiful thing about judgment is that the whole time, the whole month leading up to Rosh Hashanah is a time of deep introspection. The whole point is that we're supposed to have engaged in a process of reflection ourselves so that we don't even need judgment. Because by the time I get there to Rosh Hashanah, standing in front of the judge, I've already searched inside myself and hopefully have been so moved by my own discovery of failing to live up to my true potential that I fixed myself. That I said, wow, I can be such a better father. I can be such a better husband. And through that introspection, hopefully I will have fixed myself. And that's the whole mystical concept of hamtakat dinim, or sweetening of the judgment, that really we have the power to fix it ourselves. But that judgment isn't something to fear. That judgment, although it might be uncomfortable, it's something that's given out of love. It's because God's saying, you know something? Really, if you look at it, God is really the only necessary component in this universe, right? If God didn't exist, nothing would exist. And in the grand scheme of things, I'm not really so important. Really, the world is not hinging on David Betterman, right? I know it's a big shock, but it's true. The world is not depending on David Betterman. I might feel that it does, but the truth is, in the grand scheme of things, I'm kind of insignificant. But what happens? Really, it would seem that I'm not even deserving of judgment, because God is so great and so powerful, and really the whole universe is hinging on Him. What's that to do with me, right? I'm kind of like the guy in the parking lot. I'm like the guy who stole the space, and there's no point to going to therapy with me because I don't really matter so much, right? So why is God judging us? If we are so insignificant in the scheme of things, so we shouldn't even warrant to be judged. We should just be brushed aside. But that's exactly what Judaism says. That really, each and every one of us has such an important mission to accomplish in the grand cosmic scheme of things. And it's a mission that no other person, no other soul is capable of fulfilling. Each one of us has been charged with such an important mission, and really, on a deep level, the whole world is counting on you to fulfill your mission. So Rosh Hashanah is an opportunity to say, listen, I love you so much, and you're so important to me, and you're so important to what's happening here. This judgment, this corrective directive is coming down to help get you back on track, because I care about you so much. In this relationship, the relationship between each of us, the relationship between each one of us and the creator of the universe is of such paramount importance that He's giving each and every one of us the tools to get back on track. So that's judgment. And like I say, we hope that through introspection and soul searching that we can fix our own shortcomings, and so the judgment won't even be necessary. If I get to the judge and I say, I caused this traffic accident, but in the last 6 months since it's occurred, I've gone through I've self-imposed system of rehabilitation, I've retaken the driving test, and I've participated in 30 hours of community service to help me expand my perception of what the community is and why I need to learn to drive more responsibly. If I get to the judge is going to say, wow, that's right. You seem to have gotten yourself into awareness that doesn't necessitate me disseminating any punishment. She probably would have let me walk away. But it's okay. It was a long time ago. So that's judgment, and really judgment is a great thing, and it's very exciting because it's a tool to help me get back on track to fulfilling my mission, and it's also a tremendous confidence building measure because it affirms for me that really I matter. I matter on a cosmic, I matter on a divine level. And that's very powerful. So now we're up to the end of the 10 days of repentance, which are the 10 days of introspection between being given that judgment and now being atoned. You see, what's the difference between the day of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? What's the difference between the day of judgment and the day of atonement? Well, first of all, there's a heck of a lot more food on Rosh Hashanah. I'm not starving. I may be standing up in shul, in synagogue for hours and hours and hours, but I'm not starving myself. And in fact, on Rosh Hashanah, although it's the day of judgment, I'm not recalling any sins. The Kabbalah says that we should not discuss any wrongdoing or any transgressions that we might have done. But on Yom Kippur, we exactly do just that. And one of the big questions I had for a long time is, why do we fast on Yom Kippur? So what's really going on? Well, the truth of the matter is we don't just fast. There are actually 5 afflictions that we participate in on Yom Kippur. We refrain from eating and drinking. We afflict the body by not washing the body. If you work in a cow pasture and you milk the cows and you're all covered with feces and dirt, so you have to wash. We're talking about washing that's for comfort, for relaxation. So that kind of washing we don't do. We don't anoint the body with creams, again, not for enjoyment purposes. We also refrain from marital relations, and we refrain from wearing leather shoes. Now, all of these things might seem mildly related, but it's kind of questionable what all of these things have to do with the overarching theme of Yom Kippur. Now, for a long time, I thought that really I'm probably not allowed to eat on Yom Kippur because I've been such a bad guy this year. I've done a lot of bad things. And really, I'm afflicting myself, I'm punishing myself as a vehicle to gaining atonement. I've seen there's cultures around the world, I don't know what it's about, but there's a lot of bloodletting, and they cut themselves. You can see on YouTube, like in Eastern countries, out in Indian stuff, they literally cut themselves up, and there's all this public bloodletting. I don't know what's going on, but that's certainly not what's happening. Meaning, I thought for a time that by punishing myself and starving myself, that self-affliction would help generate or facilitate the atonement. But really, what's going on is much more powerful and much more joyful. So we call Yom Kippur Yom HaKippurim. And it sounds remarkably familiar to another holiday by the name of Purim. Now, if you look at Purim, Purim is a great holiday. You're drinking, you're getting drunk, and the point of which is to not know the difference between the righteous Mordechai and the evil Haman. That we should be so drunk that we should confuse the two and not see their differences. So we can bless Haman. But that's kind of confusing, because why would you ever want to bless Haman? I mean, why would you want to bless Hitler? And on a mystical level, what's happening is we're saying that from our perspective, we see 2 separate things. We see the wicked Haman, who tried to destroy the Jewish people on one hand, and we see the blessed, righteous Mordechai, who really did everything he could to help save the Jewish people. And from our perspective, those are 2 polar opposites. But what we're saying on Purim, and we'll get to a moment on Yom HaKippurim, is that really, from God's perspective, there's no difference. You see, there's a divine plan. And the question is, could we really mess up or interfere with God's plan? I mean, the Torah says that we have something that's called free will, right? That we're not under robotic control where we're told what to do, and no, that we actually have free will. But what are we free to do, and what are the potential outcomes of that free choice? For example, Haman, he chose to destroy the Jewish people. He chose to do everything he could. He built a gallows. He was going to hang Mordechai, right? He was going to destroy the Jewish people, passed an edict, and that the king stamped that all through the lands, people should annihilate the Jews, and it was passed and stamped. He did everything he could to make this annihilation happen. But in the end of the day, what happens? Remarkably, through an 11th hour turnaround, everything switches around on its head. And in fact, it's the evil Haman himself who gets hanged on his own gallows. And Mordecai ends up being promoted to Haman's position of being the king's right-hand man. Now, through the whole story of Purim, in the scroll of Esther, the Megillat Esther that we read on Purim that documents this story, not once is the name of God mentioned. Not once is the Hebrew name of Hashem mentioned in this story. What is mentioned is an allegory for God, which is Hamelech, or the king. And the Purim story is all about how, through a complicated sequence of events, salvation comes seemingly through no direct intervention of the divine whatsoever. And yet here's this guy, Haman, using all of his free will to try to bring about his own story, his own plan, right? And seeing how that just falls on its head effortlessly without any huge miracles. There was no parting of the Red Sea, there was no thunder, no hail, no lightning, no plagues, no frogs. Seemingly, just through nature, everything turns around and Haman himself is destroyed. And that's kind of difficult if we try to understand what is free will worth then. I mean, if Haman and everybody else here has free will, what difference does it make if, in the grand scheme of things, there is a divine plan and we really understand that we have no power to change it? I mean, if God really has a plan for the world and that plan is already in force and there's nothing that I could do to affect God's plan, so what difference does it make what I choose to do? Right? And that's what Yom Kippur is teaching us, that it makes all the difference in the world. You see, what did Haman choose in the story of Purim? Haman chose to try to write his own play. Haman chose to try to change history by writing his own sequence of events. And in the end of the day, what did he change? He changed his experience because Haman chose to see himself as separate or outside of the grand scheme of things. He chose to see himself as outside of the divine plan. He tried to enact a divine plan of his own. And all he succeeded in doing was experiencing himself as separate and as cut off. And in the end, he destroyed himself. Right? But Mordecai goes to Queen Esther, who is the queen, she's right next to the king. And he says to her, Esther, intercede with the king, beg him to please rip up this decree and save the Jewish people. Now, Esther knows full well that if she goes to get the king's attention without being invited, and he declines her request for an audience, that immediately is death. And so Mordecai says to her, he says, Esther, I'm begging you, go to the king and intercede that he should rip up this decree and save the Jewish people. And what does he say then? Because if you don't, salvation will come from somewhere else. He didn't say, Esther, you're our only hope, and if you don't do it, we're doomed. He said, no, salvation's going to come. God has a plan, and there's nothing you can do to destroy that plan. But if you don't take this opportunity to intercede with the king, then you will miss out on the opportunity of experiencing yourself playing such a vital role. Meaning the choices we have in this world determine our experience in this world. There was a story about the famous Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach, who founded this community that we're living in here. And there was a story that he was walking with a woman whose son had reconnected with his Jewish roots, and later in life, in his 30s, decided to have a bar mitzvah. He had never had this confirmation type ceremony as a child, and after coming back to his roots, he decided to do it. Now, his mother was not very happy with this process he'd engaged in, and she was walking with Rabbi Carlebach, and suddenly she turns to him, she says, Rabbi, I don't even believe in God. She's very angry and very adamant. And he just lackadaisically said, oh, okay, so don't. She was very confused. She says, but Rabbi, every rabbi I've told that I don't believe in God, they've tried to prove it and convince me and tell me I have to believe in God. And why? How can you just get off saying, so don't? And he says, lady, you don't understand. If you want to choose to believe that there's no God, and that consequently, if there's no God, that the world is just an accident, and maybe it just evolved from a random collection of gases, and that you just happen to be after all of this time and all of these things, but really, if there's no God and there's no meaning to the world and there's no meaning to the universe, that really you're just an accident and that your life has no divine or cosmic purpose. If you want to believe that, then that's your choice. If that's going to be enough to get you out of bed in the morning and give you a sense of meaning and purpose in your life, then go right ahead. But I could never live that way. I choose to believe that there's a creator, and the creator built this world, and he instilled each and every one of us with a soul and a divine mission. And that's what gives me meaning. And that's what keeps me going, because I'm able to see my life as having divine significance. I could never live a life that allowed me to see that my life was just an accident. I could never get out of bed in the morning. So you see, what's happening on Rosh Hashanah is that God's telling us that our lives have such tremendous significance. And Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, is saying that no matter what we may have chosen, even though in the grand scheme of things we could never choose to affect or derail God's plan, our choices do have a tremendous impact on how we experience ourselves in the world and how others experience us. And Yom Kippur is saying that if you made choices and the outcome of those choices had an effect that maybe wasn't positive, understand that everything is in God's control, and it's not in your power to change. If you stole something from somebody, that's well within your power to change, and you have to go back and give back what you stole and even pay restitution. But if there's something you did, and you did your best, or you chose, and now 30 years later you look back and you say, I regret my choice, right? How can I ever go on? Look at the results of my choices. And as I grow up and I raise my children and I struggle with my own shortcomings, and I see, look, my child is becoming just like me. And I'm trying to work on this, and now I think I fixed it, but I really affected some of my older kids in a different way, and I see that change coming, and it's deeply painful for me. But Yom Kippur tells me, there's only so much in your power, David. Yeah, you may have made bad choices, but now I'm forgiving you for those choices, and you can start again, right? Yom Kippur is reminding us that the world is not in our control. What is in our control is the choices we make, and ultimately what we choose determines what we experience. Haman chose to destroy the Jewish people, and his experience was really of destroying himself. And he experienced himself as outside of the divine plan, right? But Mordechai and Esther chose to see themselves as necessary participants within a grand story, with grand significance. And they experienced the tremendous benefit, the intense joy of being part of a meaningful process, right? And they chose accordingly. And Yom Kippur is saying, the outcomes of our choices are not in our control. So if you can't choose, if you can't fix it, and you made choices that resulted in certain unexpected or unforeseen consequences, you can let go. I'm letting go, God says, and that we need to learn to let go too. And so the reason that we afflict ourselves in these 5 ways is because this type of forgiveness, this type of consciousness, this type of recognition of the significance of our choice and the necessity to forgive ourselves as we're being forgiven on high that has such tremendous spiritual significance. You see, all year long, we're being affected by the force of the Satan. Now, the Satan, from a Kabbalistic perspective, is not like this red-faced devil with horns and a pitchfork, right? From a Jewish perspective, the Satan is the force of evil in the world that draws us away from our true spiritual and our true godly nature. It's the force in the world that says you're really no more, you're no greater than your body. You're just a part of this world, and there is no significance, there is nothing beyond this world, and there is no real deeper purpose than to your life. So eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die, and choose according to what feels good. Choose according to your nature. Don't choose according to any higher purpose, because there is no higher purpose, right? And that's the force that we're constantly faced with 364 days a year. But there's one day a year where that force, where that energy in the world has no dominion, right? And it's on the most spiritual day of the year. The most powerful, the holiest day of the year. And that's Yom Kippur. That's the Day of Atonement. The day that's like Purim, that's so celebratory, that's so enjoyable, but like Purim, which is a celebration of the body, it's the salvation of our physical salvation, of being saved from the clutches of these destructive nations. Yom Kippur, Yom Kippurim, Yom Kippur, is the day of spiritual salvation. It's the day where you get forgiven on a spiritual level for all of the choices that you may have made that were not the best choices, that were not in keeping with your true spiritual or your true divine potential. And that day is completely beyond the dominion of the physical world, because it has such drastic spiritual significance. And that's why we don't eat, because we have no reason to eat. Because we're engaged in such an intense, powerful, and exciting spiritual process that has nothing to do with my body. And so too, we don't feed the body in any other enjoyment level, because we're not dealing with enjoyments of the body. We're so engaged in the rapture of spiritual forgiveness and reconnecting with our spiritual purpose. Because if we're holding on to those choices we made, whose outcome was completely beyond our control, if we're not letting go, then we're never going to grow. And we're never going to live a happy life, a full life. And if we're not living a happy and a full life, we won't be able to give our true full potential to our friends, to our family, or to the world. And so we have to let go. We have to let go of all of the stuff we tried to do and maybe we failed, because the failure wasn't in our ability to choose. So Yom Kippur is really about putting everything back in God's hands and letting go. It's about saying, there may have been times this year where I forgot that I'm really an integral participant in a divine story, that there's a divine plan and that I'm playing a very important role in that plan. There may have been times where I forgot and I tried to write my own play, my own script, and I saw myself as being removed or separate from the grand scheme of things. But Yom Kippur is about letting go and putting everything back in God's hands. It's about letting go of all of the pain and all of the regret for all of the things that came out of the decisions that we may wished we had not made. It's about saying, I have to forgive myself for those choices, because what happened really wasn't in my power to control anyhow. Everything that's in my power to change, I have to change. I have to go, I have to ask forgiveness from those that I've harmed or those that I've offended. But everything that comes out of choices I made that's outside of my power to change, I have to remind myself that it was always in God's power and it was all part of His plan anyhow. And so I'm giving back that into God's hands, and God's giving me forgiveness. God's forgiving us for all of the bad choices we might have made that were not in keeping with us living up to our true potential. And the most important thing about Yom Kippur is realizing that we also need to forgive ourselves. Because when we learn to forgive ourselves, then we're able to live on with an open heart, with a free heart, without the pain and without the weight and without the suffering of regret. And we can really free ourselves to become our true, full, happy and loving selves, so that we can really be a good friend, a good husband, a good wife, and a fabulous parent. And that we can really offer the most of what we have to offer to the whole world. Wishing you all a Shana Tova, as we say in Hebrew, Gemar Chatima Tova. May you be sealed may you be sealed with a good seal in the book of life. And may this year be a year of us all reaching our true potential and bringing tremendous happiness, tremendous joy, and tremendous unity to the world. Love you all.